All right, Rhonda Sawchuk, thank you for coming on to Here We Go.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so you're 5 years sober, right? You have a story of
Correct.
running drugs, getting in trouble, going to prison in Canada, and now your mission and your purpose is you help men that have really torn their lives up get back on track, correct?
Yes, it takes one to know one.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So
Yes.
let's kind of start at the
Yeah.
beginning. You grew up. Where did you grow up?
My hometown is northern BC, kind of like that farming oil boom community.
Okay.
And I had a pretty regular childhood. My dad was a blue collar worker, worked in the oil fields in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was a farm girl, went to the Navy, or sorry, not the Navy, Air Force.
Okay.
But I think like your regular teenager, I got into drugs and alcohol at a really young age,
So tell
and
me,
I
tell me
didn't
about
really
like
have any.
the first time
Yeah.
you ever picked up. Like, tell me about that. How
Ooh.
old were you?
Uh, I bet you I was probably about 12.
Okay. Is there a
Yeah.
story behind that, or do you remember that, or?
You know what? I think it's the norm for a lot of people, to be honest with you. Like all the guys that I have in my facility where I work, generally the age is around 12 to 15, where people start
Yeah.
really experimenting with all the drugs, binge drinking, right? But if you don't have anybody to help you navigate those challenges, then the ruptures happen.
Right. So 12 years old, you started drinking. Go ahead. I
Mhm.
interrupted you a minute ago to ask you
Oh,
about that
no, that's
first
fine.
time.
That's fine. Yeah, no, I started drinking, and obviously cannabis was around, experimenting with mushrooms and LSD, and then I probably started getting into cocaine about around 15
Okay.
because I always hung around with older people, and that was the thing. That was the popular thing to do. The people that had cocaine were, had money and cars and the best parties.
In Canada, you're in high school. What at is it ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th grade like it is here? Or
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
so you're in high school. 15, like my son's 15, he's a freshman in high school.
Hmm.
So I think about that. That's about how old I was when I first started with a little bit harder stuff. What was that like? Were
Yes.
you in school? Like, were you a good kid on the outside? Were you able to hide it?
Yeah, I mean, I was in sports. I had horses. Everything was good right up until about 12 or 13. And then I started getting into a lot of trouble at school. I actually got expelled, so I didn't graduate. And my mom and dad never really, enforced that I get back into school. They basically said, well, if you're not going to go to school, then you got to go to work. So I found construction, and then I was just, peas in a pod, right?
So you got how old were you when you got expelled?
I didn't even, I don't think I finished grade 9. I
Okay.
definitely did not do grade 10 or 11 or 12.
Okay. So what did you get expelled for?
Getting caught smoking weed.
Okay. Was it like fourth or fifth time or the first time or
I think, yeah, it was the first time, but I mean, we were just bad kids. We were always skipping out. That was probably just the catalyst.
okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So you got expelled, and then your parents told you had to go to work, and then
Yes.
you went to work where?
Out in the oil field, out in construction. Yeah. And then, and it's no secret that pipeliners and construction, when people are on the road and traveling to remote locations, that, we're a little rough around the edges. It's wild. It's wild, wild west out there. So, you get into a group of people now where it's drinking and drugs are plentiful. And like I always say, if the consequences aren't celebrated, then they're tolerated. So it was just a lifestyle.
Yeah. So you're a
Yeah.
teenage girl in the oil field, in the pipelines. I'm trying to like imagine
Mhm.
what that's like and what that looked like. And
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of money to be made out there, like a lot. So you kind of get into a lifestyle, it's like they always say it's a rock star kind of lifestyle.
yeah. And so you're going to work,
Yeah.
traveling, and your parents are okay with that. This is what, the 80s or the 90s, the 80s? 90s?
That would have been in the yeah, that would have been in the mid to late 80s.
Okay.
But then when I moved to Vancouver, BC, then that's when the trouble really started. Because that's where I ended up getting into organized crime. It was just so easy to transition into that because I was already hanging around with kind of a rough crowd, no rules, outlaws,
Right.
rule breakers.
Right. Okay. So you're
Yeah.
in the oil fields. You're working. Tell me how that happened. How you got into like organized crime and started doing what you were doing.
Yeah. Well, just moving to Vancouver, the transition was, economically, it's hard to make money in the city, it's especially if you don't have an education. So my roommate at the time had a family that was pretty high level organized crime. And we started grow ops. And this is during the time in the 90s when BC Bud was going straight across the border for straight exchange, pound for pound for cocaine. So it was like a pretty big deal. The grow op was very sophisticated, and then we got busted.
So
So
what's a grow
that
op?
was
Tell for people that don't know what is a grow op.
we're growing cannabis, but
Okay.
obviously illegally because now it's legal. But however, back then it was not. And during the 90s, when it was going across the border, it was kind of connected to the cartel and whatnot. So it was pretty serious consequences.
So tell me like the first time you were introduced to that, you got into that, like tell me that story.
Yeah, well, like my roommate at the time in Vancouver, she had, family that was involved. And we were kind of down on our luck. We weren't making any money. I had just got laid off from my work. I was angry. I was mad at the system. I was on the verge of, taking the steps of being like, an addict. And the money just sounded a little bit too easy. And yeah, so they set us up in a grow up, and it was a pretty large one, sophisticated system. And we were also stealing the hydro. We were bypassing the meter, so that's where the federal offense started. That's where that came in.
Okay, so what did you do? Like you're how old? Like they brought you in. What is that like? What was your role in it at first?
Well, we helped with the entire setup, right? So just getting the lights all set up, the trays, the tables, the plants. Like it was a lot of work actually. We had to get up every day and make sure that everything was running correctly. There was climate control, the lights, watering. There was, you got to put vitamins and like fertilizer and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of work actually, but
So they
I
taught you
don't
to
know, I
be a
loved it. I got
farmer.
to
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I loved it. I loved it because I loved having that green thumb.
Yeah. And then so
Yeah.
you get finished growing in, and then how did that progress? Like what was your role in the whole thing moving forward?
Well, so we were the growers, so it was like a third and a third and a third. There's obviously somebody that's got the money, the funding to back all of this up, and then there was another guy that had all of the equipment that came in and hooked up all the hydro and all of that. And then there was two of us, me and my roommate, my friend, who stayed at the house 24/7 and actually did the growing part, watering and clipping and trimming and all of the things.
Got it.
So we're basically taking care of a gigantic greenhouse.
Yeah. Okay. And is it illegal in Canada at that time? I'm sure it was. As the night.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, yes. Very illegal at that time.
Yeah. Was this in the city or was it
Yes.
outside of the city or?
It was somewhat in the rural area.
Okay.
And it was really interesting because when it all started to kind of go downhill, I noticed all of the signs that was happening, that I knew that we were under surveillance. My intuition was going off, and everybody was like, just stop being so paranoid. Stop being so paranoid. And I'm like, no, like something is not right. And sure enough, they waited though, because we were on surveillance. So they waited until we were cut We had already done our cuttings, and the guy with the money was coming to do the exchange, and that's when SWAT hit, the emergency response team. So they got me and my friend in the ferry lineup. We were leaving the area, and so they busted the house, but then they also took us down, the ones that were leaving the house in the ferry lineup.
Ferry lineup meaning get on the boat, like ferry. Okay,
Yeah,
got it,
yes, yeah.
got it. And so they got. How old were you when that happened?
I think that would have been in my mid 20s.
Okay,
Yeah, like early 20s.
okay,
But during that time, like I said earlier, because it was such a huge operation and it was going across the border and it was directly related to organized crime groups, when I got charged, the judge pointed right at me in court and said, "Young lady, I'm going to set an example out of you." And I was looking at doing 5 years.
okay. So you're like in your early 20s, right? Is that the first major
Yes.
consequence you had from? Yeah.
Yeah.
So when that judge
Yeah.
said that to you, do you remember what was going through your head, like what you
Oh,
were
time
thinking?
stood still.
Yeah.
Yeah, time stood still. And my roommate, my partner in crime at that time, she worked at this really bougie golf and country club. So she had access to a lawyer, a very, high profile uptown lawyer who took my case. And basically, if I pled guilty to all of the charges minus the theft of hydro, I would have that particular charge dropped and then I would serve provincial, which is what happened. And I ended up serving 18 months.
Okay. So in your early 20s, what is it like going to prison in Canada? I mean, I know I've heard a lot of stories of people in California
Yeah.
and Texas and different places in the United States. What's that like being a young?
Um, it's an experience that I'll never forget.
Yeah.
Being over on the federal side was a lot different. Over there was women that were doing a long time, obviously. Some of them were murderers, armed robbery, violent home invasions, kidnapping. But it was more structured, believe it or not. There was more structure, there was more programs, there was a hierarchy. So everybody kind of just stayed in their lane. And if you didn't, then there was obviously consequences. But I just minded my own business, did my own thing, and I didn't have any problems, thank God. But then when my charge got dropped and I had to serve provincial time, that's where the shit show was,
Okay,
because it's
so
more of a
wait,
revolving door.
you went somewhere first, and then you had other charges you had to serve. So you did how long in
Yes.
the first federal prison? Is it federal prison? Is that what it was you went to first?
Yeah. Well, while the whole thing was going to trial, I was over on the federal part, and
Mm-hmm.
then when those charges got dropped, then I served the rest of my time out in provincial. But that was worse. It was like a revolving door. There was a lot of drugs, lots of fights. It was chaos. And then when it got really cold outside, or if it had snowed, it would start filling up because, sometimes people are using it like a Holiday Inn or something.
They want to go to jail to get out of the cold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I heard that from other inmates too, that they would have rather have served federal time because it's just more structured.
Mm-hmm.
And even the men that I work with now, they'll say the same thing,
Yeah.
that federal has way more structure and programs and whatnot.
Is provincial? That's a word for that's like our state prisons in the United States. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got
Yeah.
it. Got it.
Yeah. There's provincial and federal, and provincial, yeah, is a little bit. It'll be more like less, or 2 years less a day is what they kind of say.
Yeah. So your mindset, you're in prison, you're in your early 20s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Were you using drugs in there?
I did.
Okay.
Yes, I did. I actually got drugs brought in there. It was so easy. I hate to say that, but it really was.
Yeah. Visitors just bringing them to you, and so
Yeah, and they cut tennis balls open. They paint them black, and they cut a tennis ball open, and they shove them full of drugs, and they whip them over the fence at
Okay.
night.
Got it.
And then when you're out on the track doing your daily walk or whatever, you'll see people run off the track and you're like, what the hell, where are they going? And that's what's happening is they're getting drugs in.
So, do you remember your mindset while you were in there? Were you thinking maybe I need to get it together, or were you just going to go back to what you were doing? What were you thinking while you were in there?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris, because I look back on that and I used to get a little bit angry about it, but I just found that there was no support. I don't ever remember seeing a counselor. I don't ever remember anybody coming in to, ask you like, what the hell do you think you're doing with your life, speech.
Mm-hmm.
And when I left there, it progressively got worse because then basically what happened after that is it just put me on the radar for higher levels of crime because now people know that I'm not a rat. I can serve time. I've got that stoic, um, persona, or I guess whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so I just ended up meeting more people that were doing bigger things.
So it was almost like going to crime school and having something on your resume where you got in trouble and you didn't tell, and
That's
it kind of advanced
exactly
your
what happened.
career.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get out,
Yes,
and
it did.
are you on any kind of like here it's parole, or are you on anything like that when you get out, or how does that work there?
Yes, I definitely was on probation. And then I ended up meeting my ex now, obviously, but my fiance. I ended up meeting my fiance, who is part of an organized crime group. We were engaged for 4 years, and then I got to see the business end of things.
Okay, what does that look like, the business end of things, as much as you can
Just
say?
creating, yeah, well, just creating networks.
Mm-hmm.
Because then I got into cocaine.
Okay.
It was a lot of yeah, it was a lot of cocaine. So then you start building networks and clientele and whatnot, and there's no shortage of people that will fill that list.
Yeah. And are you using cocaine at the
Yes.
time? Are you drinking? Like, what was your like drug of choice during that time?
Yes, yes, I was absolutely drinking, smoking cannabis, and doing cocaine, but a very high functioning addict.
Okay.
I could definitely, hold it together and whatnot. But it
Got it.
was a really high paced lifestyle that was like I still to this day do have PTSD from all of that.
You're engaged, someone that's kind of high up. You've learned a lot of
Hmm.
tricks of the trade. You're out of prison.
Yes.
Your mindset is just this is who I am and this is what I do, or did you ever have the thought, man, maybe there's a different way, or at that point, or no?
No, I was completely blinded by the lifestyle. There was just nothing that you couldn't do, nothing you couldn't buy. And that sounds terrible, I know, because I'm completely the opposite now, but the materialistic gain, the cars, the bikes, the lifestyle, like, it's exciting, it's exhilarating. Anybody that's an adrenaline junkie,
Yeah.
yeah, I just fit right in.
So your addiction was just as much the lifestyle as it was the actual chemicals.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So then what
Yes.
happened? Take me through that whole story and that point part of your life where you're out of prison, went right back to it.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Yeah. So my ex, he was a very violent individual. Not to me at first, but he was I guess you could say he was a bit of an enforcer. So there was a lot of aggression, things, and he started to spiral big time. He started getting addicted to his own supply. And obviously, as we know, when you're in addiction, things start falling apart at the seams. So I had to leave. It was getting way too volatile, like way too volatile. And he did become violent one night where I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, I got to get out of here. Unfortunately, it's not that easy to leave. I did have people to answer to, because on their end of things, a scorned girlfriend can really mess shit up.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it has happened in the past, where a scorned girlfriend, all the undercovers got to do is like pull her over in a traffic stop, and the tears come, and then the stories will start to come too. And I wasn't that. They didn't have anything to worry about, but I had to prove that.
Yeah.
So those calls that were coming in, I had to answer them. And it was scary. I was terrified.
You mean those calls that were coming in for people that wanted to meet with you and make sure you were. And so did you
Yes.
keep working for
Yes.
them, or how did that work?
No. No, all I did is I just said, "Hey, like it's not personal." I had utmost respect for them, and that if, at any given time I would be allowed in their establishments.
Yeah.
And I think that might have been the saving grace, because he basically said, "You know what, sweetheart, you have a good day." Click. And that
Yeah.
was the end of it. I never heard from them again. And then I moved provinces.
Okay.
I moved to Alberta, and then I found a whole nother lifestyle that I didn't see coming. But now I had the business skills and all of the things that I'd learned in that relationship. And now I kind of went on my own path and created networks. And wow, my life was never the same after that.
So who'd you meet in Alberta, and what happened, and you
Mm.
changed directions
Yeah.
there?
Yeah. Well, I got introduced to raves.
Okay.
So from there, yeah, and I got introduced to raves, and of course, like the drugs and the ecstasy and the parties and all of the people in it. It was so easy to navigate that lifestyle, that world. Didn't take long.
Got it.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it didn't take long.
and then it was your deal now. It wasn't your fiance's and you're helping out. It was like you were the one doing
Yes, that's
things.
correct.
Okay.
Yes, and I had a clientele list that was very unique, that nobody else, and I shouldn't say nobody else, but a lot of people wouldn't be able to kind of navigate through, because they were, millionaires, elite people that had professional positions, jobs, businesses, right? So I mean, in the middle of the day, I was able to go into establishments where there's like security at the doors, and the thing is, the guy with the backwards hat with the gold chains with the gold teeth, they're not going to get through those doors
Right.
as easily as I could. So yeah, I had a lot of clientele that were really rich,
Yeah.
and even some Hollywood.
Got it. And then where did it go from there?
Well, that was a good probably 5, 6, 7 years. Definitely lived quite a fast lifestyle. And, I hate to admit it, but damn, it was fun too. We had a lot of fun during those years. But you know what? It doesn't matter. You cannot get high on your own supply. It does not work.
And did that finally catch up to you?
So,
Okay.
yes, it sure did. Yeah. So I hit rock bottom. Yeah, I hit rock bottom. I was a full-fledged addict. There was a period where I was smoking crack cocaine, and I was still functioning out in the world, but nobody knew that, at the end of the day, I was locking myself behind closed doors, and just going on these, 2, 3 day benders. And oh, it was terrible. I mean, I'm surprised I'm even still alive.
Yeah. And then what?
Yeah.
Tell me about that moment where you knew you hit rock bottom and you were just like, this is it.
Yeah. I just got tired. Like, you just have to wake up one day and look at yourself in the mirror. But actually, I think there was several catalysts. I mean, the addiction part was definitely one part of it, but there had been a couple home invasions. And that's when I really started thinking, like, holy crap, like, this is getting serious, man. Like, I escaped a very potentially violent home invasion. And then that started. And anytime I got high after that, I mean, what do you think? Everybody's coming for you. You're
Right.
looking out the windows. You're like, it was like torture. And I just looked at my life and went, what am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
this is not fun anymore.
Yeah. So people actually invaded your house armed to knew
Oh,
you had money and
yes.
drugs.
money and drugs, and the enemy comes smiling sometimes, And actually, I kind of evaded 3 home invasions. And you just never know. Like, and that's the part is like your enemies do come smiling.
Yeah. Okay, so was there like a moment in that time where you got in trouble again, or did you just decide to get?
Oh,
Okay, so
yes.
tell me about that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely got arrested selling cocaine as well. Like I have a pretty lengthy arrest record, uh, a very lengthy arrest record, and then I did eventually get convicted 3 times, but I only did jail time once.
Okay.
But yeah, that was quite a feat getting that. Like I do have a pardon now, finally, but it took years.
Mm-hmm. How long did you go to jail for that last time?
18 months.
Okay. And was that in
Yeah.
provincial as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how old were you when that
Yeah.
happened?
It was all 20s and 30s.
Okay. Okay, so you found the oil fields, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you quit doing illegal things as far as like dealing and selling drugs. So
That's right.
tell me about that journey.
Yeah, so the oil field was actually probably my saving grace, honestly. Like even though I was still relapsing and in the addiction, I was still able to have some purpose and have a life that actually paid well. I was able to move up the ladder and I got myself into a position of health and safety. Like I started as a laborer, and then I kind of worked my way up and I really did well. Like I progressed there. I was on some really big projects, some very notable projects. And I love the oil field. I don't have anything bad to say about it, other than it does kind of support a lifestyle in addiction, right? Like I said earlier, that if the consequences aren't celebrated, they're tolerated, and that's very much my experience. Right. So you get those big paychecks, and then it was like, all right, what are we going to do? Let's go to this city and have a cocaine infused party, and party and go to concerts. And, it was a lot of fun. But again, just relapse, relapse, relapse.
Had you ever tried to get sober before then where you're like, I'm going to go to like a 12-step program, treatment, anything like that?
No, I didn't go to any programs. However, I saw counselors or therapists, but never really committed to anything. And to be honest, I was able to kind of beat it myself. Maybe if I had jumped into a program earlier, like when all of that trouble was happening,
Mm-hmm.
I might have had a better chance at sobriety a lot faster and sooner because I definitely support the programs
Mm-hmm.
now that I'm facilitating them.
Yeah.
And yeah, and but I was able to white knuckle it, and then eventually I just got into like life coaching, and then I realized with life coaching that I wanted to get further into more therapy stuff. So when I took my counseling program to be a counselor, that's when the real work started.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you start cleaning up, right? And did you work in the oil
Mhm.
fields during that time, or did you start looking at becoming a
That's
counselor
why I
pretty
had to
quick?
quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's why I had to quit the oil field, because even though I was maintaining a pretty successful lifestyle, it was every, month or 3 months or whatever, there was a relapse,
Okay. So you were trying to
you know.
quit, and then like you
Yeah.
couldn't because of the rhythm and the routine of that timeline and getting paid and getting time off and all that. Okay. Got
Yes.
it. Got it. All right.
Yes.
So how did you
Yeah,
start
it
looking
was
at
hard.
becoming a counselor? Like what interested you in that? Like where did you go? Where did you start?
Mm. Well, I started life coaching first, but then what I realized with life coaching is because you don't really look at trauma in life coaching. It's more about setting a goal and, like the action steps in order to execute that goal. And what I found in a lot of the clients and myself was that there was always these blockages. There was always something standing in your way where you would procrastinate or you wouldn't finish what you started. And I'm like, it's a little bit more deeply rooted, than just creating a goal and executing it. So then that's when I started looking into more counseling. And then I realized that it's not about what the addiction, it's why.
So for
Right.
you,
So then I
what
started
go ahead.
looking.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
So for you, what were those blockages? Like, what did you find out early on in your sobriety besides being in the oil field? What else
Mm,
was there for you?
yeah, good question. Deeply rooted trauma. Yeah. Deeply rooted trauma that was overlooked and very much unresolved.
Do you think some of that was childhood, or was it more when you started doing what you were doing?
It was definitely childhood. And then during my adolescent years, it was just compounding, you know what I mean? Because once those events happen, it just seems like that it ripples out and they continue to happen. And if there's no one there to help you repair those ruptures, then the next stage of your life, you're just taking that baggage with you and compounding the interest.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy to think like as a kid you can go through things and you don't know how to deal with it, and that
Yes.
carries on into your teenage years and your early years, and you're
Yes. Yes.
wondering. Everybody looks at you and goes, "Why aren't they a good kid? Why are they this? Why are they that?" And
Yeah,
there's
it's so
stuff.
true.
Yeah.
Because, like, yeah, even when I was incarcerated, I remember talking to, and I don't think it was a counselor, I think it was a correctional officer. They were kind of doing an intake and definitely not trauma informed at all. They actually shamed me and said that, you have good parents and, why are you like this? And I'm like, whoa, what the hell? Okay. You don't know anything about me.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, during that time though, I didn't even know what was wrong with me. So,
Yeah. You come from a good family. I come from a good family, and I can
mhm,
remember being in my later teens, and people are just like, "What is wrong with you? You come from a good family. What's
yeah.
going on?" And honestly, I didn't know. I just knew that
Yeah.
the way drugs and alcohol made me feel gave me a sense of relief,
Mhm.
of comfort that I just didn't
Yeah.
have because my normal
Yes.
day to day feelings were rooted in a lot of trauma and things that occurred when I was younger that I may not even like ever thought about like in my frontal lobe, So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, and I really like what you said, Chris, just right now about how like your day-to-day feelings were deeply rooted in trauma. Because one thing that I hear a lot is people say, well, you knew better. You knew right from wrong. You had a decision, you had a choice. And even though that is somewhat true, people don't really understand, when you have those deeply rooted behaviors and beliefs in the trauma that that shapes you and all of your developmental years,
yeah,
right? When your brain, yeah, like when your cognitive processing skills quite haven't gone online yet.
sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So you started life coaching, right? And was that just an idea you had? Did somebody teach you how to do that? Like, how does that begin for someone?
I actually took the Jack Canfield Success Principles course.
Okay.
And I don't know if are you familiar with Jack Canfield?
No.
He's the co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like he's a great, I love that man. He's so amazing. And actually I kind of did my research on what program that I wanted to take. And because he had actually designed programs for juvenile delinquents and the prison system, I'm like, that's my guy. I
Mm-hmm.
want to take his course. And I did that and I absolutely loved it. So I am a certified Jack Canfield train the trainer, but then I jumped on board with a gentleman by the name of Kaler Betts, and he has a pretty strong following on social media and he's got a fairly decent program as well. So I actually started life coaching under his umbrella. But I just knew that I wasn't really in alignment with his mission because he primarily worked with women, and I had this calling to call on the brotherhood because I had been around the brotherhood my whole life, and I naturally gravitate towards the brotherhood.
The
So
brotherhood of
here
the
we are.
oil field workers and just men in general. Is that what you mean by
Everybody.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
See,
Yep. The brotherhood and organized crime,
yeah,
oil field, all of it.
yeah. Okay, so you felt that calling, and then you started getting into counseling. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, the program that I took was very extensive. It was 50% academic and then also 50% experiential. So all of the modalities uh, of therapy that we learned, we also had to try on.
Mm-hmm.
So we would be in a, like, my cohort was like, say, 22 students, and then we would go into breakout rooms. So, you would be the counselor, I'd be the client, and then switch. Right. And this was like for months and months and months. So it was like having therapy on steroids. Oh my God. And, I always compare mine next to an exorcism because that's what it felt like.
Wow. And so that really helped you
Yeah.
grow and probably helped you eventually with your
Yes.
sobriety. Okay, so you
Yeah. Immensely.
okay, so then what was your first counseling job?
Well, I took on some private clients for a little while.
Okay.
But the thing is, though, I'm not quite registered yet so that I can take insurance benefits, but I will be. That is on my goal list. You just have to write an exam and then get registered. However, I think I want to further my education, though. I do want to get into more criminal psychology
Yeah.
or even criminal justice. But my first counseling job, like legit now, is at the treatment recovery center for men. It's a 60-bed facility, and it's 80% of our clients are all coming out of the judicial system. Like, they've been in prison for a minimum on an average of 6 years. And then 70% of those are all violent offenders.
Oh, wow.
So I'm right at home.
You're right at home. Those are your people,
I'm
right?
right at home.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it. So let's talk
Thank
a little
you.
bit. I want to know a little bit about your experience, and you felt called to the brotherhood, which I really resonate with and understand that because of all the
Hmm.
worlds I've been in with coaching football and friends that are in different
Oh, interesting.
organizations or motorcycle
Yeah.
clubs, and I see that world and I know that world, and
Yeah.
just the brotherhood of the guys I'm around in AA. We're tight.
Ah.
So tell me what kind of called you to that as a female. I mean, that's pretty neat. Number one, number two, like,
Yeah.
was there an experience? Was there an event? Was there something that happened that just made you think, okay,
Mm.
this is the direction I want to go?
Yeah. Well, there's two parts to that, actually. Because even when I was in the thick of it and I was in that lifestyle, there was a lot of men that always came to me for, like, to be seen and heard and to tell their story and get things off their chest. They would come to me for advice. It was really bizarre, but they just gravitated towards me in that sense. And there was actually, like, no joke, there was times where I would stick my finger in my ear and start to hum and go, no, 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 like, you can't tell me that, like, please don't. Right, like, that's between you and the creator, but if you
Right.
need to get that off your chest, like, please.
It's
Right,
not yours.
because it just put me in some
Mm-hmm.
it just put me into some very dangerous situations. And then the second part of that, which you might find a little bit bizarre, is actually the plant medicine space.
Okay.
I've sat with ayahuasca a handful of times, and I've also done a psilocybin journey that is very, like, sacred and indigenous medicine carriers, very safe and sacred space. And that has been my message every single time, is to call on the brotherhood. And actually, after a ceremony, without even sharing my experience with the shaman, he came up to me the next day and said, Rhonda, I want you to start calling on the brotherhood. I was like, what? Like,
Mm.
how did you know that? But he obviously had seen that in the journey. And then every single journey after that, it was the same thing,
Right.
right? It was the same thing.
So, an ayahuasca ceremony is a Native American ceremony, correct? Am I right about that? Okay.
Well, the Shipibo, yeah, the Shipibo lineage from Peru.
Okay. It's from Peru. Okay.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
the first time you did an ayahuasca, had that experience. And you and I talked about that a little bit offline when we originally met.
Yeah.
Tell me about that experience. I think you briefly just touched on it with the shaman telling you that, but tell me about that experience.
Yeah. It was probably one of the most incredibly challenging situations I've ever been in. It was so dark, so demonic. It was scary. I just felt like I was fighting for my life the entire time. However, what I found was that I still had like a residual, like a sticky, greasy fingerprint of that lifestyle on my energy body, if that makes sense
Mm-hmm.
for all the spiritual people out there. Yeah, so I just knew that I needed to clear that.
Got it.
Right. And the shaman even came up to me the next day too and said, "We're going to clear that energy tonight." And I was like, "Oh my God, here we go. Here we go."
Yeah.
And then just all the journeys after that, it all pointed into facilitating or going behind the brick and mortar and actually doing this work. And it actually gave me a number too of 15 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know. Yeah, because I spent 15 years in organized crime and being a hooligan. Now, so it only makes sense that I'm supposed to do 15 years of this work now.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me
Yeah.
about like your experience working with men that are broken. They're coming out of prison. Like I've got a lot of friends that have gone through that experience, and at least here
Yes.
in the United States, it's a very hard road. The deck stacked against you. The likelihood of
Yes.
you going back is very great. There's not a lot of things on your
Yes.
side because people don't want to employ you. You almost have like the scarlet
It's
letter.
so true.
So is that the same
Yeah.
in Canada?
100%. Yeah. And because I do the initial like it's called a RICAP, it's a personal plan, like a reintegration plan. So I collect a bunch of data, like the first time that they've used, if they've got any grief and loss, how old were they, any trauma, and the common thread with all of this is abuse, particularly sexual abuse. I can't count on two hands how many men that have been in my office that have been sexually abused. And the thing is, what happens then is it sends a shockwave through that young person's life. They lose all sense of stability and safety because a lot of it was from the very people that were supposed to keep them safe. And that common thread now is that these young men go into adolescence and they find crime and violence as a way to regain that power that they've lost and also to like regain their masculinity as
Mm-hmm.
well, because that's a very confusing experience for a young man to be sexually abused.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're angry, and the thing is, a lot of them don't have family to go back to. They don't have sober living to go back to. They don't have a driver's license. They've generally don't have bank accounts because they have completely blew up their life. They don't have resumes. They don't have housing. So when they complete our program, now it's like a lot of them lose their shit right towards the end. They actually fall apart because of the uncertainty of what now they have to go back into.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to advocate too, is like we need more programs. We need more companies to step up and say, hey, we'll hire a crew of 20. Sure, it's okay if they got a criminal record,
Mm-hmm.
and just give them job experience, work experience.
Yeah. So how hard is that to find a job after in Canada?
Yeah, well, I found the oil field, and that's what was good about the oil field, because there's no criminal record checks
Right.
going into the oil field.
Mm-hmm.
And for most construction, However, a lot of these guys, think about maybe going out there to find work. But then I always tell them, like, you got to be careful, man, because now you've got a huge pocket full of money.
Mm-hmm.
There's drugs everywhere. So are you going to be able to maintain sobriety?
Yeah.
So it is an uphill battle, you know.
Yeah.
Really, it's a tough road.
Yeah. Are you seeing many
Yeah.
success stories? Like, what's the compared to
Yeah.
failures or?
Yeah, I have definitely witnessed a success story, like a lot of success stories. Um, However, they really have to be committed, right? They really have to continue therapy on the outside.
Mm-hmm.
And therapy is not cheap, right? So, like, because even if you look at housing, like if they find low income housing through BC Housing, chances are now they're going to be surrounded by other addicts
Right.
that are also in low income housing.
So it's tough, even if you're trying to do the right thing and coming up. In order to do the right thing and come up, you have to be around things that you're trying to get
Yeah.
away from.
Yeah, it's really difficult. We do have some programs that we work with that help them build like a resume, and there is one or two companies out there that will hire only our clients, not only our clients, but they will definitely hire our clients. So there's a little bit of flexibility there, right? Because the thing is, we always have to remember it's not about what the addiction, it's why. So there's a lot of deeply rooted behavioral problems, and a lot of it is anger management.
Mm-hmm.
So if they have a boss that, raises his voice, now we got a guy that's going to flip a switch.
Right. They have a different code
So,
than the code that
yeah, it's,
is
it's
normal
tough.
life.
It's tough to reintegrate.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So what kind of, so do you do groups there? Do you do one-on-ones there? Do you have a
Most of it is, yeah. Well, there is a curriculum. Like we have everything from newcomers to leadership skills, anger management, healthy relationships, even a parenting course. I don't facilitate any of those. However, I do facilitate grief and loss.
Okay.
Because with grief and loss, it's a very heavy, heavy topic. And there's a lot of things that we go over, like suicide, overdose, murder, homicide. So they kind of want like a more of a counselor or a therapist to facilitate that,
Mm-hmm.
because there's a lot of group processing. But we have a facilitator that does have those courses. She teaches those courses, and then we have like Indigenous sweats. There's a cultural healing circle. There's guys that can sign up to church and go out of the facility after 3 months of good behavior. They can go out into the community. And then there's NA and AA, the 12 steps, and personal 12 steps. So there's a lot going on there.
How long is the
And
program?
that's where the 6 months. Yeah.
Okay.
And that was exactly what I was going to say next, is that we just did a 3-year study, and clients that stay 3 months or less have a very low percentage rate of success. Those who stay 6 months or longer and go into our second stage, and then they've got like up to a year or 2 years there, I do believe. Then the success rate goes up to 89 to 93%.
Yeah. There's studies here. The longer people are in treatment, the better chances
Yeah.
they have of success. The unfortunate things with
Yeah.
the way that treatment is down here is the funding is tough if it stays funded, and then if it's
Ah,
private insurance
yes.
funded, they sometimes shorten the amount of time that really gives them the best
Exactly.
chance for
It's like
success.
that here too. Like, yeah, the treatment recovery center that I work with is a nonprofit. So again, we have to justify our funds,
Mm-hmm.
and at any time we could lose that.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot wrap my head around that. Like, I think that these should be mandated programs, that there's always a fund there. And then, like you said, the private ones are really expensive.
Yeah. You think about like
So
that in
they're
a
short.
political sense, at least here, if there was more money invested in recovery and reintegration and
Yes.
helping people would probably save a lot of money on law enforcement and crime and things of that
Oh,
nature. I mean, it's never going
huge.
away, but it's like,
Mhm.
these guys
Yeah.
I see down at AA that are getting out of prison sometimes,
Yeah.
it's tough,
Yeah.
man. They've got a parole
It
officer
is so tough.
that's not their friend, and you know,
Hmm.
tearing apart their room maybe every couple of weeks, and
I
looking to put them back
know.
in jail. You've got a
Mhm.
society that you
It's,
know doesn't want much to do
yeah.
with you as far as employment goes, and
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. It's so true because I just recently did an interview with a former correctional officer. I've done two now with a correctional officer. And she said the same thing. She's like, it's such a joke because you've got a guy that's in jail for, say, drinking related offenses, and now he's out and he's on probation. And now you expect him to stay away from alcohol is like telling a diabetic not to eat the donut. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it's everywhere and there's no support for him when he's on the out, except for group, but it needs to be more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you started a podcast. How long ago did you start your podcast?
It's only been a couple of years, I think. I think
Yeah.
I'm only up to maybe interview 24, 25.
Oh, wow. What's the name of it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
What
been fun.
What's the name of it?
Trouble to transformation.
Trouble to Transformation.
Trouble to, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing this one
Yeah.
a couple years now. I did it through another
Yeah.
platform or a company I worked with before this one, and then I started this one
Mhm.
up about 8 months ago and just started recently releasing all my episodes, and I really have fun with it. But the first one
Yeah.
I did, I was so nervous, and it was like nerve wracking. And
Yeah.
now
It's
I have
quite,
a lot of fun with it.
yeah.
So tell me about your first
Yeah.
interview. Who was it with? What was the idea? How'd it go?
Oh man. The first, like I knew right away who I wanted my interviewees to be, the Brotherhood, obviously. And the first one was a friend of mine who's a young guy up on a bunch of charges, addiction and whatnot. And then I started interviewing former law enforcement. And actually, one of them, Seb Lavoie, we kind of laughed a bit because he would have been part of the Vancouver ERT during that time. And I just reached out to him and said, hey, like,
The ERT.
were you ever a
What's ERT? That's a SWAT team
SWAT?
that came
Yeah,
and got
yeah.
you with your farm. Okay.
Yeah, well, a couple of times. I've had three SWAT experiences.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so anyways, we kind of laughed and I said, hey, like, did you ever take down organized crime and drug dealers down in the lower mainland? And he was like, yep, for 16 years.
Oh,
And I was
wow.
like, oh my God, you've been through my doors. And not, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, we had a good laugh about it. And I ended up interviewing him and then a couple more ex-law enforcement or former law enforcement, and then some ex-convicts.
Okay.
And I loved it so much. I'm like, yeah, I really enjoy this, but it's a lot of work. I need a
Yeah.
Cole.
Yeah. Yeah. Cole's
Yeah.
great. So absolutely. So
Yeah.
okay. So people can find your podcast where?
Well, my Instagram handle is rhonda.lynn.live.
Okay.
And the podcast is the same thing, Rhonda Lynn Live, Trouble to Transformation. And yeah, it's been great. Yeah, if anybody's ever actually, I'm going to have you on, Chris. I would love to have like hear your story.
Love to do it anytime. So
Yeah.
a couple more things I want to talk about, like purpose, and now that you found your purpose and
Mm.
how that feels, and what life looks like for you today.
Well, it's interesting because when people ask, like, how do you know that that's your purpose? When you're in a true alignment with your purpose, it's just so easy to get out of bed in the morning and go do your thing. And I'll be honest, I'll just be completely transparent. Working for a nonprofit, not being in the oil field, like financially, it has been such a huge, huge transition for me. I went from driving, $120,000 vehicle to a jalopy. and my bank account isn't bursting at the seams anymore. And the thing is like you have to really want to do it. And somebody asked me that too. They said, Rhonda, what would you do for free that you absolutely love to do, but you didn't get paid for? And this is it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Cause I mean, the podcast is not monetized either. I mean, it's something I would maybe like to do. We'll see. I just not sure yet where my path is next, but
That's awesome. Okay, last question. What is your message for, I think I want to speak to your audience, for that guy that's maybe getting out of trouble, prison, maybe just in the middle of it, and just doesn't know where to do, is confused, angry, frustrated, embarrassed, all the above. What's your
yeah.
message for that person?
My message would be that it's never too late and that it's going to be a hard journey. But if you're going to do the work and put just as much effort into being a better person than with the effort that you are getting into trouble, the dysfunctional relationships, the addictions, and that hustle, right? If you put that equal amount of work into the other side, you can make it happen. Like you just have to believe in yourself and let go of some of these deeply rooted behaviors and beliefs, those limiting beliefs.
Absolutely.
No.
Love it.
Yeah. And step into therapy, and have a look at those ugly, ugly parts of ourselves that you think that by not looking at them, that they're just going to go away, because they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. And as men, we all have secrets, and we got to tell them to someone.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
therapy is the safest
I've
space
heard
to do
a
that.
lot.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And not to be afraid of being judged, right? Because when you go see a therapist, that's why they're there. They want to do that's their passion. They want to help people. So regardless if a therapist has lived experience or not, just be willing to look at those parts of yourself, like peeling back the onion and getting to the real stinky parts, right?
Yeah.
That's where the work is.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Let's catch up next week. I appreciate you.
Yeah.
All right, Rhonda.
Thank you, Chris. One thing I have to say though,
Go ahead.
This is like one of the first times I've actually told more detailed parts of my story. And yesterday when I texted you and I said I was feeling a bit nervous, I so appreciate that you picked up the phone and you called me like just like nothing. Yeah, I really appreciated that, because I felt in that moment I was like, I'm in good hands. This guy, he cares. He actually cares.
Well, you did a great job, and it was fascinating. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on, and it was fun.